All right, so this video is the first in the series for the new MODX M. It's just an introductory video. I'll talk about some of the features and comparisons against other boards. The complete video tutorial set is available for sale on Sudosonic.com. Link is in the description. You can check that out. Probably going to have another example video from the complete series on the channel as well, so make sure and do a search for that if it doesn't come up as recommended. So in these introduction and comparison videos, what I like to do is talk about some of the features compared to its predecessor, which this keyboard's predecessor was the non-M version of the MODX. And then also I think the board that most people compare this to would be the Phantom O series, so the Phantom 06 and 07. That's because some of the features and price point is really close to this keyboard. So to jump in, let's first talk about some of the capabilities of this board compared to the non-M version. So the non-M version only had 4 sliders. The M version has 8 sliders, so it makes it where you can quickly access and control levels and parts in your editing, which kind of makes it easier rather than having to press a button to jump from the first 4 to the last 4. And that's basically the same for the scenes. You know, you got 8 scenes, but on the previous version you only had 4 scene buttons, and you had to press a button to go to the next set of 4, 5 through 8 of those scenes. So that was a little awkward sometimes, especially if you're working on using the scenes for real-time arrangement for triggering patterns and things like that. Also, one of the new things in the M series is the ANX engine. So this is the virtual analog engine that's been put into the M series. We can scroll down. I'm just on live sets now, but what I'm doing is I want to go to look at some of the ANX patches or performances here, so you can see all these in this particular page of live sets are built with the ANX engine. And I'm just going to jump into the home screen for that selected performance, and you can see there's a diagram showing all the oscillators and filters and things. Now with this diagram, you know, you can click on a couple things in there, but this diagram is kind of just like a page view diagram. That's not really where you're doing a lot of editing. You can set this up to be able to show that when you first go to the performance. But when you actually go in and do editing, you're going to use this navigation button, which is also a new feature in the new M series. And from here you can see a diagram that pertains particularly to ANX parts that you have set up. So if we go to a different, let's go back to a different live set. So this one uses the AWM engine to create the sound. If we go to its performance home screen and then we look at its navigation, you can see it doesn't have all the same modules that the ANX engine has. So that kind of makes it easier. A lot of people think that having all the different modules mixed up, and so you're editing parameters that have the same diagram, but then you have different controls for different analog oscillators. It kind of makes it more flexible, but I think it makes it less flexible in some way, because when you're looking at how the modules are laid out and how they connect together and the parameters that you're adjusting, you want those parameters to reflect the type of engine that it is. It just makes it more simpler. So this is kind of a theory that the Korg Kronos had as well. You know, it had multiple engines, and so the menus on each one of the different style synth generators or sound generator engines was different, so it allows you to change the layout, basically the menu screens, so it made more sense for editing. And so that's kind of why I like using the MODX M compared to something like the Phantom O series, which uses the Zen core. And so the Zen core does have the ability to use oscillators that are virtual analog oscillators, but then some of the menus can kind of get confusing, because when you dig down into the menus of the Zen core, a lot of those interfaces look a little bit more complicated. So the ANX engine does kind of have the ability to make it look more simple. So here we're looking at just the oscillators, and there's things in here like you would expect for virtual analog editing. So like parameters like ring modulation, FM levels, and also pulse width. All those are kind of parameters that you would see in a virtual analog engine or a real analog synth engine. Another thing that's cool too is any one of these parameters that you can highlight with a white rectangle around it, basically you can assign those to be controlled with either a knob or a slider. So all you do is you just highlight the parameter you want to have controlled by one of these knobs or even the motion sequencer, and you click the control assign button, and then it'll come up with where you can choose what you want this to be controlled with. So you could make this be controlled with the ribbon. Let's exit back out of this and go back in. Or, you know, if you wanted this pulse width to be controlled with the knob, you could just hit control assign and then turn the knob. So you don't even have to click anything on the screen. You can just turn the knob that you want to control it, and it automatically assigns it to that knob. So that's really quick modulation assignment. You see this in a lot of keyboards. A lot of modern day synthesizers have this feature. So a lot of the sequential synthesizers, the Roland Gaia 2 has this. So anyway, that makes it easy. But the thing I'm pointing out is the fact that these parameters that are within the oscillator, so not just like common assignments like cutoff for the entire performance, but we're talking about individual parameters. So like even the ring modulation can be assigned to a motion sequencer or some type of knob. All right, so let's talk about some things that the MODX does not have compared to maybe the Phantom O series. One of the most blatant things that it does not have is it does not have sampling, and it also does not have the 16 pads. So you can assign those pads to trigger samples that you either record, and then you can also have those assigned to play phrases, musical phrases, or patterns. And so it gives them a lot of flexibility, and also they're velocity sensitive. Now, the MODX has a few tricks up its sleeve. You can trigger different patterns or arpeggiators with the scenes, but then again, you only have 8 to choose from, and they're not velocity sensitive. They're just buttons that you press. So it doesn't quite have as much flexibility for live triggering of those patterns, much like Ableton Live has. But of course, you're not limited to just using these pads or using these scenes to arrange a song. You could do that in other ways by just chaining together different phrases. So most of the time too, these keyboards, they don't have a full-blown sequencer. Both this one and the Phantom O series, they have a pattern sequencer. So it would just create patterns and you would chain those together. And that gives you enough flexibility to kind of get a song idea going, but not really for creating a whole song where you do mastering or play piano or something, or you know, your lead part over top of multiple phrases as you go all the way through. That's kind of harder to do. So you can't really do linear recording on either one of those. So most of the time what you would use these with is a DAW. And so when you're doing that, you can just, you know, record in your musical parts or loops or whatever you want to tracks in your DAW, and then just use this to create the parts and kind of get a loop going or get the inspiration going. But then when you're doing in-depth arranging and editing, you're going to do that with the DAW. So another thing too about the MODX M, it's similar to the Montage in that you get the VST plugin that lets you have a standalone version of the synthesizer. And so that's really good functionality, especially if you're using, let's say you're on the road, or you have your keyboard set up where you can't leave it connected, and you want to be able to access those sounds and functionality. You know, you can do that with the plugin. I've used the plugin a little bit. One thing to note is that it doesn't mirror controls. So if you're really wanting that functionality, you're going to have to go to something like maybe the Arturia Mini Freak, which has its own virtual engine or virtual synth that's standalone as well. And so what's cool about it is when you change dials or controls on it and it's linked up to its virtual or its VST plug-in counterpart, then everything is mirrored. So every slider, every move, every knob that you move, even selecting different patches on the board will change on the VST that's on your computer screen. So that kind of gives it a little bit more functionality. I wish the MODX M virtual analog synthesizer or VST plug-in had that functionality, but it does not. All right, so this completes the introduction to the MODX M, and if you're interested to learn more in depth about the MODX, be sure and check out the complete video tutorial series on Sudosonic.com.